whites simply could not accept black leadership of a mainstream consumer business. Yet one black entrepreneur did cross over by getting Americans to dance across the color line. Until then, the business of music had been strictly segregated.
As the music business began in the early 20th century, we were in the middle of the Jim Crow era. As a result, the music industry is born in Jim Crow. It retains the contours of Jim Crow.
It's bound up with incredibly racist, white supremacist ideas that were degrading to African Americans. And this racist ideology moved right into the time of recorded sound. When you first have record labels like Victor Records coming into prominence, you don't see African Americans having any ability to break into that business.
The irony of the American music business is that Black Americans have provided the content for this business, the culture for this business, but have not had equity and have not had control of the access to it.
The only place African Americans had a foothold in the business was on stage and behind the mic.
Anybody with two good ears and two good eyes could see that for most of the 20th century, the music of white Americans had been Black music, whether it be Louis Armstrong in the 1920s, 1930s, whether it be Ray Charles, Little Richard, Chuck Berry in the 1950s. What Motown did was find a way to get that equity from that cultural transaction. That's what Berry Gordy did.
Starting out, Gordy found inspiration in an unlikely place.
He takes the job in the Ford factory. So he's at the Lincoln Mercury assembly line. He's listening to all the machines rattle away day after day. And he thinks, I'm going to start making music listening to the beat of these machines. He starts composing some of his first songs on the assembly line.
In 1959, with an $800 loan from his family, Berry Gordy went from assembling some of the country's most popular cars to making the country's most popular music as the founder of Motown Records. With Motown, Berry Gordy put Black people in charge of the business of music for the first time. With the Temptations, the Four Tops, Martha and the Vandellas, and Motown's crown jewel, the Supremes, Gordy brought that natural feeling to young people everywhere.
Whether you personally dig the Detroit sound or not, there's no question it's being dug by a lot of youngsters to the happy tune here of an estimated $15 million gross a year.
In its first 10 years, Motown placed an unparalleled 79 records on the Billboard 100 charts, thanks to Berry Gordy's ear for music and mind for business.
What he understood was the power of music. How do you create poppy 2.5-minute songs that white kids will want to listen to on their car radios?
Company that was capable of creating a product from womb to tomb, shall we say. He had songwriters on staff, producers on staff, musicians that worked in the studio day and night called the Funk Brothers. He had a management company that took care of business affairs. He had a booking company.
It's not a one-man organization or a two-man organization, but it is an organization of teamwork. And I could go and name them all down the line who are the unseen heroes.
Gordy deliberately neutralized the discomfort of whites who might pose an obstacle to his progress.
He decides to hire white executives to go into these radio stations and pitch his product. And he gets people like Barney Ailes to go in there and make these connections for him.
Berry Gordy built the Motown brand through the 60s and 70s. And by 1983, the company had annual sales of over $100 million. Motown was the most successful Black-owned business in America, and the first whose products successfully crossed over to white consumers.
Many major cities that had prospered under the Great Migration by the 1980s had fallen victim to some of the worst economic and social policies of the era.
New York City. This is a city that's on the brink of default. The President of the United States says to New York to drop dead essentially without giving it federal support.
This mass abandonment wasn't just a loss of people, it was also a loss of capital. Social, economic, and investment. And so in the 1980s, the artistic movements that come out that will later become hip hop is a critique, a response, and a result of people being left behind.
What's important about hip hop's emergence is that it was always do it yourself. It was always a DIY culture. They always talked about folks being on their hustle, being on their grind.
A rap ode to a sneaker signaled the arrival of a hip-hop business that would become bigger than music.
It's very difficult for Run DMC in the 1980s, after recording a song called My Adidas, to even get Adidas to pay attention. Whenever hip-hop wants to broach some sort of new territory, the folks who control that territory in the mainstream say, we don't really think it's marketable. We don't really think it's mainstream. And it forces the folks in hip-hop to found their own businesses.
Hip-hop artists created a multi-million-dollar hip-hop apparel industry. Like Black entrepreneurs before them, they built something new by recognizing a market that others couldn't see.
Just come off the elevator and then just to see the whole Rockaware thing. It took me seriously years to get over that. I used to walk out the elevator and be like, oh, that's incredible.
Rap music isn't just about the mean streets anymore. It's just as much about Wall Street.
For hip-hop's millionaire moguls, who were once doubted and scorned, there seems to be no end in sight.
From sun up, sundown, we get money, 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 money. You can say what you want every day. Money, 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 money.
Where you really see hip-hop grow as a business is in the area of consumer products. When Jay-Z sold Rockaware, the clothing company, he sold it for $200 million. 50 Cent following suit with his investment in vitamin water. Sean Combs following suit with Sean John. Fat Farm selling for almost $200 million. And then finally, what Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine are able to do with Beats, selling to Apple.
Apple has reportedly offered to buy Dre's ubiquitous headphone company, Beats, for $3.2 billion.
The journey of hip-hop from that street culture to global culture has everything to do with the entrepreneurial impulse of hip-hop artists.
The Black entrepreneurial impulse is alive and well, not only in hip-hop, but in industries across the board. Yet, Black startups still face an uphill battle for venture capital.
In Silicon Valley, there is a minuscule percentage of African Americans and women of color who are getting investors. And it's not that they don't have good ideas, it's that they don't look like the guys who are doing the investing. They don't look like the guys who are around the table.
We drive culture. You know how frustrating it is to go into a venture capitalist office and have them blasting Drake or blasting Tupac or quoting them in articles, but not writing checks to Black people? It's frustrating. And we're trying to bypass all that. We're trying to get to the point where we don't even have to stop at their office anymore.